So here's the thing about being humanity's only xenoarchaeologist on a Galactic Council dig site. Nobody takes you seriously. Like, at all. Professor Kellan Rhodes had gotten used to it over the past 3 years. The condescending head pats from Commander Vex, the Thalorian military officer who looked like a bipedal mantis in expensive armor. The dismissive snorts from Lieutenant Rax, the security chief whose species had been exploring space for 10,000 years before humans figured out fire. The general attitude that humans were adorable space toddlers who shouldn't touch the important alien stuff. But standing in this vault on the dead planet of Architect Prime, even Kellan had to admit this was above his pay grade. The chamber stretched out before them like a cathedral built by beings who understood geometry in ways that made your brain hurt. Walls that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be strictly legal. And in the center, suspended in a field of what looked like frozen lightning, was the weapon. It was beautiful in the way that apex predators are beautiful, sleek, purposeful, about the length of a human forearm, with surfaces that shifted between metallic silver and deep void black. Organic curves merged with geometric precision. Looking at it made Kellan's teeth ache. Magnificent, Vex breathed, his mandibles clicking with excitement. Do you understand what this is, human? A really good reason to call for backup, Kellan offered. Rax's tentacles twitched with amusement. It is an architect relic. The architects vanished 50,000 years ago, leaving behind technology we still cannot comprehend. This weapon has been sealed in this vault since before your species discovered agriculture. Cool, Kellan said, making notes on his data pad. And we're sure touching it won't, I don't know, explode the planet? The vault has DNA locks, Vex explained with the patience of someone talking to a particularly slow child. It has tested every species that entered for millennia. All were found wanting. The weapon refused to activate. Until now, Rax added, moving forward with scanning equipment. We shall conduct proper analysis before attempting activation. What followed was the most extensive scientific poking and prodding Kellan had ever witnessed. Energy scans, molecular analysis, gravitational mapping. The weapon just floated there, looking smug and dangerous, refusing to acknowledge any of it. 3 hours later, they carefully extracted it from the vault using a containment field. The weapon allowed itself to be moved, which somehow felt more ominous than if it had resisted. Back on the research station orbiting the dead planet, Kellan watched as every dignitary, scientist, and military officer in the sector lined up to try activating it. Vex went first, naturally, pressing his 3-fingered hand against the surface with the confidence of someone who had never failed at anything. The weapon did absolutely nothing. Rax tried next. Then Professor Quillix, the Zentari geneticist. Then Ambassador Thorn, whose species had mastered biotechnology before Earth had multicellular life. One by one, they touched the weapon. One by one, it rejected them with the silent contempt of a nightclub bouncer turning away the badly dressed. Kellan found it hilarious, which was probably why Vex kept shooting him dirty looks. Perhaps, Vex finally said, his voice tight with frustration, we should attempt a broader genetic sampling. Lieutenant Rax, prepare DNA extracts from all known species in the database. Even humans? Rax asked, the question dripping with skepticism. Even humans, Vex confirmed, looking at Kellan. Though I suspect we are wasting time. The architects were a sophisticated species. It seems unlikely their ultimate weapon would respond to such a, forgive me, Professor, primitive genetic line. None taken, Kellan lied. I'll just be over here, not touching the scary ancient superweapon like a good little primitive. He turned to gather his equipment, fumbling with a sample container. His hand slipped. The container's edge caught his thumb, drawing a thin line of blood. And that's when everything went sideways. The drop of blood hit the weapon's surface with a sound like a bell tolling underwater. For one perfect moment, nothing happened. Kellan had just enough time to think, oh, thank God, before the weapon exploded with light. Not metaphorically, actually exploded, with light and sound. And what felt like every emotion Kellan had ever experienced compressed into a single moment of absolute connection. The weapon launched itself from the examination table, crossing 3 meters of space in a heartbeat, and clamped onto Kellan's forearm like it had found its long-lost best friend. The sensation was indescribable. Imagine every nerve in your arm suddenly discovering religion. Now add electricity. Now add the feeling of coming home after a really long trip. "Get it off!" Kellan screamed, very professionally. Vex was already moving, his combat training overriding his shock. "Security Protocol Omega! Containment field, now!" The containment field slammed into place around Kellan, who was now doing an interpretive dance that could best be described as man versus enthusiastic alien technology. The weapon wasn't hurting him exactly. It was just very insistent about staying attached to his arm. It's not coming off," Kellan reported, trying to pull the weapon free. It held firm, its surface now rippling with patterns that looked disturbingly biological. Rax had his weapons drawn, all 6 of them, pointing in Kellan's general direction. "Professor Rhodes, do not move. Commander, recommend immediate quarantine procedures." "Already initiated," Vex snapped, his mandibles spreading wide in alarm. "How did this happen? Human DNA should not have registered. The architect's technology requires advanced genetic markers, neural complexity that humans simply do not possess." "Well, clearly someone forgot to tell the murder bracelet that," Kellan said, examining his new accessory. Now that the initial panic was subsiding, he could feel something else. A presence. Not quite thoughts, but impressions. Emotions that weren't his own, flowing from the weapon into his consciousness. Recognition. Satisfaction. And underneath it all, a bone-deep sense of purpose fulfilled. "It is not a bracelet," Vex corrected, moving closer to the containment field. "It is a neural interface weapon system. The architects designed it to bond with a compatible host at the genetic level. Once bonded, removal is, theoretical speaking, impossible, without killing both the weapon and the host." "That's just fantastic," Kellan muttered. "So I'm married to it now?" "Bonded, yes. Married, no. Although the Thalorian word for both concepts is the same, so in my language, congratulations on your wedding." Despite the situation, Kellan laughed, then immediately felt guilty about laughing, then felt weird about feeling guilty. The weapon pulsed against his skin, and he could swear it was amused. Over the next 6 hours they tried everything: molecular dissolvers, energy dampeners, politely asking it to let go. The weapon remained exactly where it was, wrapped around Kellan's forearm like the world's most dangerous watch. But the really interesting part started when they brought in the historians. Professor Quillix, the Zentari geneticist, arrived with 17 researchers and enough scanning equipment to analyze a small moon. They spent 2 hours examining both Kellan and the weapon, their expressions growing increasingly confused. "This makes no sense," Quillix finally announced, her crystalline features refracting light in agitated patterns. "The genetic markers required for architect technology compatibility should not exist in human DNA. Your species is too young, too divergent from the primary evolutionary pathways." "And yet," Vex observed dryly, "here we are." "Indeed. Commander, I need access to the architect database. All of it. Something is very wrong with our understanding of human origins." What they found, 3 hours later, made absolutely no one happy. The architects, it turned out, had not simply vanished 50,000 years ago. They had seeded genetic experiments scattered across the galaxy, designed to evolve naturally over millennia. Most failed. Some succeeded in creating new species, but none retained the core genetic markers of their creators, except one. On a little blue planet in an unremarkable spiral arm, a species of curious primates had evolved with 98% genetic compatibility with architect base code. "You're saying humans are architect descendants?" Kellan asked, his brain refusing to process the implications. "Not descendants," Quillix corrected. "Inheritors. The architects left insurance policies across the galaxy. You are the only one that survived, the only species that retained enough of their genetic legacy to interface with their technology." Vex's mandibles were clicking so rapidly it sounded like aggressive typing. "This changes everything. The political ramifications alone." The weapon pulsed, and suddenly Kellan heard something. Not words exactly. Concepts, images, a sense of ancient patience finally rewarded. "It's been waiting," Kellan whispered. 50,000 years. waiting for humans to reach the stars. Turns out bonding with an ancient superweapon is really awkward at diplomatic functions. Kellan stood in the conference room of the Galactic Research Station, surrounded by the most important beings in the sector, all of whom were staring at his arm like it might suddenly decide to redecorate the room in a modern biological matter splatter style. Ambassador Thorn, a Hexarian whose species had the unfortunate evolutionary trait of looking perpetually disappointed, cleared his throat. "Professor Rhodes, we need to discuss the nature of your, shall we say, new appendage." "It's not an appendage," Kellan objected. "It's more like a really clingy roommate who happens to be a weapon of mass destruction." The weapon pulsed with what Kellan was learning to recognize as amusement. Great. He was bonded to a superweapon with a sense of humor. Over the past 18 hours, Kellan had gotten more familiar with his new companion than he'd wanted. The weapon communicated through impressions and emotions, occasionally supplemented by images that appeared directly in his mind. It was eager, patient, and definitely had opinions about proper tactical positioning, which it shared whenever Kellan stood with poor posture. Professor Quillix pulled up a holographic display that made everyone in the room lean forward. "We have analyzed the weapon thoroughly. What we have discovered is alarming." "More alarming than a human bonding with architect technology?" Vex asked. "Yes, this is not merely a weapon. It is the weapon, the architect's final creation before their disappearance. According to the fragmentary records we've accessed through Professor Rhodes's connection, this device is called the Genesis Purge." Uncomfortable silence filled the room. "That sounds bad," Kellan said. "That sounds really, really bad. Like supervillain bad." "The Genesis Purge is capable of rewriting DNA at the molecular level across entire star systems," Quillix continued, her voice steady despite delivering what was essentially an apocalypse briefing. "It can eliminate species, create new ones, reshape life itself according to the will of its bonded user." Kellan felt all the blood drain from his face. "I'm sorry, it can what now?" "In theory, you could point at a planet and decide everyone there should be purple, or have 6 arms, or cease to exist entirely." Quillix paused. "The architects built this as their ultimate tool of creation and destruction, and they designed it to only activate for someone carrying their genetic legacy." "Okay," Kellan said slowly. "Okay, so here's a thought. What if I just decided not to use it? Like, at all? Ever?" The weapon pulsed against his arm. Approval, Kellan realized. It liked that idea. "Unfortunately," Ambassador Thorn interjected, "that decision may not be yours to make. Word of the weapon's activation has spread throughout the Galactic Council. Every military power in the sector knows that a human has bonded with architect technology." "Let me guess," Kellan said. "They want it." "They want you," Vex corrected. "The weapon cannot be removed. You are now the single most valuable strategic asset in the galaxy. Also, potentially, the most dangerous." Rax, who had been silent until now, pulled up another display. "We have intercepted communications from the Krell Empire. They are mobilizing their fleet." The Krell. Even Kellan, who'd spent most of his time with his nose in archaeological texts, knew about the Krell. A militant expansionist empire that believed in genetic purity and species hierarchy. They'd been quietly conquered neighboring systems for centuries, always stopping just short of provoking a full galactic war. "They want the Genesis Purge," Quillix said. "They have been searching for architect technology for generations. With this weapon, they could reshape the galaxy according to their ideology, eliminate species they deem inferior, create a perfect empire in their image." "Over my dead body," Kellan said. "That," Vex replied grimly, "is precisely what they are counting on. A dead host means the weapon becomes inert and potentially transferable. The Krell Supreme Commander has issued an ultimatum. Surrender yourself and the weapon within 48 hours, or they will take you by force." Kellan felt the weapon pulse against his arm. Not fear, readiness, like a guard dog hearing an intruder at the door. "How big is their fleet?" he asked. 200 warships, Rax reported. "Against our research station's defensive capabilities, we would last approximately 14 minutes. "The Galactic Council is debating our response," Ambassador Thorn added. Some factions believe surrendering you to the Krell is the only way to avoid a devastating war. Others believe the Krell must not obtain the weapon under any circumstances. And what do you believe? Kellan asked. Thorne's expression somehow grew even more disappointed. I believe we are all about to discover exactly why the architects disappeared 50,000 years ago. Ultimate power does not bring peace, Professor Rhodes. It brings only the fear of that power being used. Kellan looked down at the weapon on his arm. It had stopped pulsing, waiting. He could feel its consciousness pressing against his own, patient and ancient. It had waited 50 millennia for this moment, for a human to reach the stars and claim its legacy. What were you for? Kellan whispered to it. Why did they make you? Images flooded his mind. Not answers exactly, questions, tests. A civilization facing extinction, not from war, but from their own success. A final tool, designed not for the architects themselves, but for whoever came after. Whoever proved worthy. 48 hours, Kellan said aloud. Okay. I think I need to have a very long conversation with my new friend here. Because if I'm understanding this correctly, the architects didn't build a weapon. Then what did they build? Vex asked. A test, Kellan replied. And I really hope humanity doesn't fail it. The Krell Empire's flagship, the Dominator, emerged from hyperspace with the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the face. Kellan watched from the observation deck as 199 more warships materialized around it, their hulls painted in the Krell's signature blood red. The effect was meant to be intimidating. It worked. They're early, Rax observed, checking his tactical display. We still had 26 hours. The Krell are not known for their patience, Vex replied. His mandibles were locked in a position Kellan had learned meant extreme stress. Or their mercy. The weapon on Kellan's arm had been vibrating steadily for the past hour. Not aggressive exactly. More like a guard dog that knew the mailman was coming and had opinions about mailmen. Incoming transmission, Rax announced. It's the Supreme Commander. He's demanding to speak with Professor Rhodes directly. Of course he is, Kellan muttered. Put him through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Supreme Commander Krax of the Krell Empire. He looked exactly like every nightmare Kellan had ever had about militant alien warlords decided to have a baby. Massive, covered in armored plates that seemed to be part biology, part technology. Eyes that glowed with the kind of fanaticism that made dictators look reasonable. Professor Rhodes, Krax's voice rumbled like an avalanche with pronunciation. I am told you possess the Genesis Purge. Possess is a strong word, Kellan replied, holding up his arm. It's more like it possesses me. We're in a committed relationship. It's complicated. Krax's face did something that might have been a smile or might have been a threat display. Humor. How quintessentially human. Let me be direct. The Genesis Purge is too powerful for a species as young and chaotic as yours. You cannot possibly understand its purpose or potential. And you do? Kellan asked. We have studied architect technology for 3,000 years. We understand what they were trying to achieve. Perfection. Order. The elimination of weakness from the galaxy. With the Genesis Purge, we can complete their work. Kellan felt his stomach drop. You want to use it to commit genocide. We want to use it to reshape the galaxy into something pure, Krax corrected. Species that cannot defend themselves have no right to exist. Worlds that cannot sustain military might are wastes of resources. The architects understood this. They created the ultimate tool of evolution. We are simply the ones worthy enough to wield it. The weapon pulsed against Kellan's arm. Not agreement. Disgust. Here's the thing about that theory, Kellan said slowly. If the architects wanted the most militarily powerful species to have their weapon, it would have bonded with you, or the Thalorians, or literally anyone other than humanity. We've been in space for what, 60 years? We barely have a functional military. Our biggest warship is named the Hope, which should tell you everything about our approach to conflict. Exactly, Krax replied, which is why you cannot be allowed to keep it. You lack the strength to wield such power. The Genesis Purge should belong to warriors, not archaeologists. And if I refuse? Krax's expression hardened. Then you will die, along with everyone on that station. My fleet will reduce it to atoms, and we will recover the weapon from the debris. The Galactic Council will condemn us naturally. There will be sanctions, diplomatic incidents. But in 10 years, when we have reshaped half the galaxy to our specifications, no one will remember your name." The transmission ended. Kellan stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Then he turned to Vex and Rax, who were both looking at him with expressions that ranged from grim to grimmer. "So," Kellan said, "on a scale of 1 to completely screwed, how bad is our situation?" "Completely screwed," Vex replied. "Possibly worse." "The Galactic Council has issued their decision." Ambassador Thorne's voice crackled over the comm system. "They are evacuating the station. All non-essential personnel are to board the transport ships immediately." "And me?" Kellan asked. Thorne's pause spoke volumes. "The Council has decided that the preservation of galactic peace is paramount. They are asking you to surrender yourself to the Krell. They're sacrificing me to buy time." Kellan translated. "They are making an impossible choice in an impossible situation," Thorne replied. "I am sorry, Professor Rhodes. If there were another way." "There is another way," Vex interrupted. "We fight." Everyone turned to stare at the Thalorian commander. "With respect, Commander," Rax said carefully, "we cannot win against the Krell fleet. Our defensive capabilities are irrelevant," Vex finished, "because we have something they do not. We have a human bonded to the most powerful weapon ever created. I say we use it." Kellan felt the weapon pulse eagerly. "Whoa, hold on. Use it how? Crack said this thing can rewrite DNA across entire star systems. I'm not committing genocide, not even to save myself." "Then what do you suggest?" Vex demanded. "The Krell will not negotiate. They will not retreat. In 6 hours, they will attack, and everyone on this station will die." The weapon pulsed again. Images flooded Kellan's mind. Not violence, understanding. The Genesis Purge wasn't showing him how to destroy the Krell fleet. It was showing him how to stop them. "I have an idea," Kellan said slowly. "It's probably insane. It might not work, and it's definitely going to make everyone in the galaxy afraid of humans forever." "I am listening," Vex replied. Kellan looked at the Krell fleet on the display. 200 warships, thousands of lives, all convinced they were serving a higher purpose by conquering and eliminating anyone they deemed weak. "The architects didn't build the Genesis Purge as a weapon," Kellan said. "They built it as a test, to see if whoever inherited it would use ultimate power responsibly. And I think I finally understand what that means." 5 hours and 47 minutes later, Kellan stood alone in the station's main hangar bay, watching the Krell fleet advance. Well, not entirely alone. Vex and Rax were monitoring from the command center, ready to execute their part of the plan. Ambassador Thorne had stayed behind despite the evacuation order, claiming diplomatic immunity or stubbornness, or possibly both. And the weapon was there, wrapped around Kellan's arm, pulsing with something that felt like nervous anticipation. "Professor Rhodes," Crax's voice boomed over the comm, "your time has expired. Surrender now or be destroyed." "Yeah, about that," Kellan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've got a counteroffer. How about you leave, and I don't turn your entire fleet into, I don't know, decorative lawn furniture?" Crax laughed, actually laughed. "You are bluffing. You do not have the strength to wield the Genesis Purge. You are a scientist, a digger of old things. You do not have the will to kill." "You're absolutely right," Kellan agreed. "I don't. But here's the thing about the Genesis Purge that you never understood. It's not about killing. It's about creation, transformation, evolution. The architects didn't build it to destroy. They built it to change." "Enough talk," Crax growled. "All ships, prepare to fire." Kellan felt the weapon surge against his arm, not attacking, asking, requesting permission. 50,000 years of patience, waiting for this exact moment. "Okay," Kellan whispered to it. "Let's show them what humanity does with ultimate power." The Genesis Purge erupted. Energy flowed from the weapon, not as a beam or projectile, but as a wave of pure potential. It radiated outward from the station, passing through shields and hulls like they didn't exist. Kellan could feel it, connected to every molecule of that expanding sphere, guiding it with intention and purpose. The wave hit the Krell fleet, and nothing exploded. Instead, something much stranger happened. The ship's weapon systems began to transform, molecular restructuring at a scale that should have been impossible. Cannons became communication arrays, torpedo tubes became sensor clusters, armor plating reorganized itself into civilian-grade hulls. In 30 seconds, Kellan had transformed the entire Krell war fleet into exploration vessels. "What have you done?" Krax roared over the comm.
"Given you new options," Kellan replied. He was sweating, shaking from the effort of controlling such precise transformation across such distance. The weapon had done the heavy lifting, but guiding it required focus he didn't know he possessed. "Your ships still work. They're just not warships anymore. Can't conquer anyone if you don't have weapons." You dare." "I dare," Kellan interrupted.
"Because here's what you never understood about the architects. They disappeared because they realized something. Ultimate power isn't about domination, it's about choice. They could have conquered the entire galaxy. Instead, they chose to leave, to see if whoever came after them would make better decisions." The weapon pulsed, confirming his words. "Your ships are fine," Kellan continued. "Your crews are unharmed. You can go home, rebuild, make new choices, or you can keep trying to take the Genesis Purge, and I'll get creative with what I transform next. Maybe I'll turn your ships into museums, or botanical gardens. I'm bonded to a device that can reshape reality at the molecular level, Krax. The only limit is my imagination and my ethics. This is justice," Vex's voice cut in over the comm. "The Thalorian Empire recognizes Professor Rhodes's actions as legitimate self-defense. Any further aggression from the Krell will be met with full military response from the Galactic Council." Kellan blinked. "Wait, really?" "The Council has been reconsidering," Ambassador Thorne added, his voice carrying something that might have been respect. "In light of recent events, your restraint in the face of overwhelming force has been noted." On the view screen, Kellan watched as the Krell fleet began to withdraw. Slowly, reluctantly, but definitely retreating. Without weapons, they had no leverage, no threat. Just 200 exploration ships and a lot of explaining to do to their empire. "This isn't over," Krax promised. "We will find another way." "Sure," Kellan replied. "But while you're looking, maybe explore some stuff, meet new species, try diplomacy. I hear it's very therapeutic." The transmission cut off. Kellan's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the hangar deck, the weapon on his arm finally relaxing. He could feel its satisfaction, its approval. The test had been passed, not by killing, by choosing not to. "That was insane," Vex's voice came through his earpiece. "Completely insane. Also possibly brilliant. I'm still deciding." "Did I really just turn an entire fleet into exploration ships?" Kellan asked. "You did," Rax confirmed. "Molecular restructuring on a scale we've never witnessed. The energy readings were, Professor Rhodes. Are you crying?" "No," Kellan lied, wiping his eyes. "Just really tired, and possibly traumatized, and definitely not equipped to have this much power." The weapon pulsed gently. Reassurance. It had chosen correctly. 3 weeks later, Kellan sat in the Galactic Council chambers, trying not to fidget while representatives from 47 species debated what to do about him. The weapon had detached itself 2 days after the Krell incident. Finally satisfied that its bonded host understood its purpose, it now sat in a specially designed vault on Earth, accessible only through genetic verification, meaning only humans could retrieve it, and only if they really needed to, which Kellan desperately hoped would be never again. "Professor Rhodes," Counselor Thexna of the Vaxian Collective spoke, her voice formal and cold. "Your actions have created a significant political situation. The Krell Empire is in chaos. Several of their conquered worlds have declared independence. The balance of power in the Eastern Quadrant has completely destabilized." "Is that a bad thing?" Kellan asked. "The conquered worlds, I mean. Shouldn't they be free?" "Freedom is complicated when delivered at the barrel of a weapon," Thexna replied. even a weapon used for transformation rather than destruction. Ambassador Thorne, now apparently Kellan's unofficial advocate, cleared his throat. The Council must acknowledge that Professor Rhodes acted in self-defense. The Krell threatened genocide. His response was measured. Measured? Councillor Vren of the Zelthian Commonwealth interjected. He rewrote molecular structures across 200 ships simultaneously. That is not measured. That is terrifying. And yet, Vex stepped forward, his mandibles clicking formally. He could have done much worse. The Genesis Purge is capable of eliminating entire species. Professor Rhodes could have erased the Krell from existence. Instead, he gave them exploration vessels. He forced them to choose peace. I find that admirable. Kellan felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with alien technology. Vex had gone from treating him like an incompetent child to defending him in front of the entire Galactic Council. Character development looked good on the Thalorian commander. The question remains, Thexna continued. What do we do about humanity? They are now confirmed architect inheritors. They possess access to technology that predates our civilizations. Technology that, in the wrong hands, could reshape the galaxy. In the wrong hands, Kellan repeated slowly. You mean human hands? The silence in the chamber was telling. Professor Quilix stood, her crystalline features refracting light in diplomatic patterns. I have spent the past 3 weeks analyzing human genetic and cultural development. I believe the architects chose humanity specifically because of traits the Galactic Council considers weaknesses. Emotional decision-making, irrational compassion, the tendency to choose mercy when logic demands elimination. Those are weaknesses, Councillor Vren objected. Are they? Quilix challenged. Every species in this chamber has had access to weapons of mass destruction at some point in their development. We all made choices, some better than others, but humanity, given ultimate power, chose not to use it for conquest. That suggests something important about their character. It suggests they are unpredictable, Thexna countered, dangerous precisely because they do not think strategically. Kellan had been quiet through most of the debate, but this pushed him over the edge. He stood, ignoring the surprised looks from the assembled counselors. You're right, he said. We are unpredictable. Humans do stupid things all the time. We're emotional, irrational, and we definitely don't think 300 chess moves ahead like most of you. But you know what? When we were given the power to commit genocide, we didn't. When we could have conquered, we chose not to. And maybe that unpredictability, that human tendency to do the unexpected thing, is exactly why the architects left their legacy for us. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The chamber was completely silent. The Genesis Purge showed me something while we were bonded, Kellan continued. Images of the architects at the end of their civilization. They weren't destroyed by war or disease. They disappeared because they couldn't stop themselves from perfecting everything, optimizing, controlling. They engineered themselves into extinction because they forgot how to be chaotic, how to be messy and emotional and, well, alive. That is speculation, Thexna said, but her voice was uncertain. Maybe, Kellan agreed, but the weapon activated for me. For humanity. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, because we're the species most likely to choose compassion over efficiency, love over logic, peace over victory. Vex's mandibles clicked softly. A compelling argument, Professor. Ambassador Thorne stood. The human government has submitted a proposal. The Genesis Purge will remain in human custody, but its use will be subject to Galactic Council oversight. Any deployment will require unanimous agreement from all member species. Essentially, humanity volunteers to be the keepers of this technology, but not its sole arbiters. And if we refuse this arrangement? Councillor Vren asked. Then we keep the weapon anyway and you can't stop us, Kellan said bluntly. But we're offering cooperation because that's what the architects wanted, not domination, partnership, trust, all those messy, inefficient human things that apparently make us qualified for this responsibility. The debate continued for another 6 hours. Kellan dozed off twice. Vex had to wake him the second time when the vote was called. The arrangement passed. Barely, with a lot of conditions and oversight and bureaucracy that would have made the architects weep. But it passed. Afterward, Kellan found himself in the station's observation deck with Vex and Rax, watching Earth rotate slowly in the distance. "You know," Rax said thoughtfully, "I thought humans were primitive when we first met. Weak, unworthy of being in the galactic community." "And now?" Kellan asked. "Now I think you are terrifying for entirely different reasons," Rax replied, "but in a good way, mostly." Vex clicked his mandibles in amusement. "You saved the galaxy through the creative use of irony. The Krell wanted the ultimate weapon, and you gave them exploration ships. The Council wanted certainty, and you gave them chaos they could work with. It is very human." "I'll take that as a compliment," Kellan said. "It was intended as one," Vex confirmed. "What will you do now, Professor? You are famous. The human who bonded with architect technology. Universities across the galaxy will offer you positions." Kellan thought about it. The fame, the opportunities, the chance to be important. Then he thought about getting back to dig sites, to uncovering history instead of making it. "I think I'm going to go back to teaching," he said finally. "Maybe write a book about the experience. Probably go to therapy. Definitely never touch ancient alien technology again if I can avoid it." "Wise," Rax observed. 3 months later, Kellan was back at his university on Earth, teaching Introduction to Xenoarchaeology to a classroom full of undergraduates who thought ancient aliens were cool but had no idea their professor had literally saved the galaxy. "So," one student raised her hand, "is it true you actually found architect technology?" Kellan smiled. "That's classified. But the news said—" "The news says a lot of things," Kellan interrupted gently. "Most of which are exaggerated. Trust me, fieldwork is 99% cataloging pottery shards and 1% discovering anything interesting." The students looked disappointed. They wanted stories of adventure and danger. Instead, they got lectures on proper excavation techniques and the importance of documenting everything, which was exactly how Kellan wanted it. After class, he returned to his office to find a package waiting on his desk. No return address, just his name written in script that seemed to shift between languages. Inside was a small holographic projector. When he activated it, an image appeared. The weapon, the Genesis Purge, sitting quietly in its vault on Earth, waiting. And beneath it, a message in ancient architect script that Kellan had learned to read during his 3-week bonding experience. "Thank you for proving us right. Compassion is not weakness. Mercy is not failure. You were exactly what we hoped for. May your species carry this lesson forward. Signed, the ones who came before, and who hope you will do better than we did." Kellan stared at the message for a long moment. Then he smiled, deactivated the projector, and filed it away in his desk drawer marked "Really Weird Stuff from Space." His phone buzzed. A message from Vex. "The Krell exploration fleet has discovered 3 new habitable worlds. They are requesting assistance with first contact protocols. I told them to ask the humans. You have broken them, Professor Rhodes. They are now curious instead of conquering. I am not sure if this is an improvement, but it is certainly more entertaining. Vex." Another message, this one from Rax. "My government is establishing a cultural exchange program with Earth. They want to understand how a species so chaotic can make such wise decisions under pressure. I have been assigned as liaison. I blame you for this career change. Also, thank you, Rax." And finally one from Ambassador Thorn. "The Galactic Council has created a new position, Ambassador for Ethical Weapon Technology. They have nominated you. The pay is terrible and the bureaucracy is worse. You will hate it. Please accept. Thorn." Kellan laughed, reading through the messages. He'd gone from being humanity's only xenoarchaeologist to being the guy who transformed warships with ancient superweapons to being apparently the galaxy's conscience. He typed back responses to all 3. To Vex, "Happy to help. Tell the Krell to bring snacks to first contact. It goes better with snacks." To Rax, "You'll love Earth. We have excellent coffee and terrible traffic." And to Thorn, "Can I do it part-time? I have students to teach." Because that was the thing about being human. You could save the galaxy on Tuesday and be back to grading papers by Thursday. You could wield ultimate power and choose to put it down. You could be offered fame and importance and decide that teaching 20-year-olds about pottery shards was more fulfilling. The architects had been right. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military might or their strategic thinking. It was their ability to do the right thing, even when it made absolutely no logical sense. To choose hope over despair, connection over isolation, peace over power. That evening, Kellan stood on his apartment balcony, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Genesis Purge sat in its vault, waiting. A test passed, a legacy earned, a reminder that sometimes the most primitive species in the galaxy could teach everyone else what really mattered. His phone buzzed one more time. An unknown number. Professor Rhodes, this is Supreme Commander Krax. My ship, which you transformed into an exploration vessel, has discovered something beautiful. We wanted to thank you for showing us there is more to existence than conquest. The universe is vast. We had forgotten how to be curious about it. We remember now. Krax. Kellan smiled, saved the message, and went inside to finish grading papers. Because that's what humans do. They save the galaxy, make friends with their enemies, turn weapons into tools of peace, and then go back to their normal lives like it was all just another Tuesday. The architects had spent 50,000 years wondering if any species would prove worthy of their legacy. Humanity had answered that question in the most perfectly human way possible, not with grand speeches or displays of power, not with conquest or domination or strategic superiority, but with compassion, creativity, and the absolute refusal to let ultimate power turn them into something they weren't. The weapon had chosen correctly, and the galaxy, slowly, was learning what that meant.